Welcome to Scope. I'm Hannah Joko. Here in Vanimo town in the West Sepik province, development has always moved at a snail's pace. This is usually a buzzing hub for the informal economy. But today, like many other days since COVID-19, people are only just returning to town. The West Sepik province was put in the spotlight, being the border province with Indonesia. In the northwesternmost province of Papua New Guinea, COVID-19 and its global spread prompted provincial authorities in West Sepik to immediately respond, and the Wutung border post of the PNG-Indonesian border was closed indefinitely earlier this year.
The Department of Provincial and Local Level Governments is the sole kind of like the owner of the border. I administer the border, and administering meaning that the CIQ, the Customs, Immigration and Quarantine, falls under my jurisdiction in terms of administrations and logistics and the networking with the local governments and the ILGs and anything to do with the border operations. That includes the security, the infrastructure, the hygiene and the protocols of the border. It was on the 26th of January, is that right?
January.
And then as I heard that the provincial administrator was leaving for a meeting in Port Moresby. So I was at 5 o'clock in the morning, I stopped him at the airport after listening to the news and knowing of what is happening around the world. There was millions of people dying and it was spreading across the globe towards our region. And I said, wow, this is something that I need to warn the PA before he leaves. So I went to the airport that early in the morning and told him that we need to have a meeting because in the border administration set up the structure, we have this group called the PIC, the Provincial Intelligence Committee. And the PIC is also responsible for the security of the border. So I spoke to the PA and the PA, Mr. Tilau, said, if you can go ahead with the meeting, you can. But if not, you wait for me until next week. But I came back and I thought that it's mandatory that we should have that meeting. It's important for the lives of our people along the border. The two gates were still open, Indonesian gate and the PNG gates. So I decided to have the interagency meeting and spoke to all our CIQ and the national agencies. And we decided to have the meeting with the provincial government and have the border closed. We didn't have a bilateral meeting. We didn't follow the set protocols that was in place to do anything at the border.
A West Sepik provincial COVID-19 response team was created, and together with neighbouring East Sepik, the two provinces worked closely together to safeguard its people from the looming threat.
As soon as the interagency met with the provincial government, we went straight away to form our committee. We went straight away to form our operational orders, our warning orders, and we started to deploy people.
With the border closed, a surveillance team had to closely monitor all points of entry and those who had crossed the border, who were screened and monitored in their homes prior to the setup of an isolation unit.
So they had teams that came down to assist us to go along our points of entry along the borders. We had random testing of our people, not necessarily the ones who have crossed, but just by the location, because they're at the border. We did a lot of random sampling for our populations, all the way up to telephone and back. So that was done at around March, April. We did a lot of that. We also participated in the antibody test that was done, carried out by IMR. That was also done. So, and it was good that all these testings that we have done, everybody has come back to be negative, thank God. So, but we're still continuing our surveillance. But as we progressed, and then when we had, we rented a property to make it into our quarantine facilities. Then that's where we were able to quarantine people who were, like the ones who were formally organized, officially organized through our consulate in Jayapura and through Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Those ones we had them moving across and had them quarantined at the hotel, more organized, 14 days. We observed them, and when testing done, all were negative, all were cleared, and then they were released. So that's after we got those facilities and things in place and the arrangement through DFAT. So we had some of these. But otherwise, as it is currently, we have the quarantine facilities, and anybody crossing illegally, we've been quarantining them at that facility.
COVID-19 single-handedly took the attention away from the province's other health issues, and this posed another challenge for the province.
And most of our routine services have suffered. So these are, like I said, now that we've learned more about this disease, we're now trying to refocus balance so that we give more attention to our routine services. And we still have a big challenge with all our communicable disease, especially TB, malaria, diarrheal diseases, and our vaccination is still very low for the province. So these are things that we are fearful that if we don't start doing anything, we may have outbreaks of these diseases again. So that's why for us now, we are now balancing this thing now and refocusing on some of these routine things that we should be giving our attention to, because these are the ones anyway that's taking up our beds and attention.
Communities in the 5 villages Lido, Waromo, Yako, Musu and Wutung along the west coast to the PNG Indonesian border travel regularly to purchase goods and access services. MSME operators owning tucker shops, roadside markets and market tables. They buy everything from items like rice and sugar to fuel and home necessities.
It was like a surprise to our people along the border because we never knew what was happening around the region, and especially in the Asia part of the world. So yeah, it became like a blow to them, and they started asking questions, why is the border closed and all that. So because to have those villages sitting along the border, they have their families and their livelihood and their welfare and everything is all across the border. So that was how it affected them.
With the local shipping line only docking once a month for the delivery of goods and stock for the supermarkets, shops and hardware suppliers, the majority of people living in the West Sepik province heavily rely on the batas markets that sit on the Indonesian side of the border, currently under renovation.
During our bilaterals with Indonesia, we decided to have two market days for a week. About 10, 15 years ago, it was every day. But then we realized that most people leave jobs and they go up to the markets and they don't attend to their jobs and all that. So we decided to nominate with agreement with Indonesia. We started to have 2 days only, that's Tuesdays and Thursdays. And Tuesdays and Thursdays on a fortnight week, we normally have 1,200 and almost 1,500 to 2,000 people. And Tuesdays and Thursdays on the other week, it's 700 to almost 1,000.
We take a break, and when we return, how one family in Vanimo town coped with COVID-19. While many from town moved back home to their villages along the west coast, it was the informal economy, the SME sector, that was hit the hardest. Several people I had spoken to had ventured into town for the first time after months. They were apprehensive, cautious, and just mindful of updates from the provincial health authorities. Louis and Tulai Warike and their family live along the east coast and own and operate a 15-seater bus along that route, a 10-seater hire vehicle, and also sell fuel. Their only daughter Michelle runs a small trade store. Louis, formerly a census officer, was involved with the initial provincial COVID-19 response team.
According to 2011 census, West Sepik was on 256,000. That's the population. The COVID team, through the health division in the province, they went out through all the wards. And from the provincial desk, the COVID committee led by Deputy Provincial Administrator Mr. TVWAN issue instructions to all the village court offices, LLG offices, not village court, LLG offices in the districts to come up with a district task force teams, which includes the village police, the LLG personals, and the district administration to come up with the teams responsible for disseminating the SOE orders. It depends on the various teams that we establish. We've got about roughly around 16 teams. That's across the border, because we're maintaining the international border, and also out towards another one of our provinces, that's East Sepik. So we have checkpoints at the various districts of Lumi, Nuku, and even 12 along the border. COVID-19 is a movable thing by human beings, and being in a border region like West Sepik, we have frequent uses of border, meaning that people are traveling every hour.
His wife and entrepreneur Tulai says they have hit hard times with many other families, and the only thing any of them can do is to keep going.
We are trying our best to come up with ways, like PMV owners, little PMV owners, they try to ask for the government to assist them with big package, but today that assistance or that request never met. So we are like sacrificing them to follow us with what we are trying to implement the SOE orders. But otherwise, people in the village, they are doing their own thing. I praise the village development committees. They are developing strategies with new norms at their own level. Yeah, they are improving on improved marketing, and they also create some strategies in terms of circulating their revenues. One thing good about some WhatsApp in Lumi, they were doing that like every farmer, they bring in the produce. At one of the villages I went, they bring produce and they offload it to one person who is controlling the main market, and they offload the supplies to him. He records them, and then after selling it, they came and collect the money, and he collect the admin fee of 50 toya or 1 kina.
Dorothy Tekwi and Peter Onikre, both based in their home villages, spoke candidly about how their communities were affected by COVID-19.
All the little petrol cells around and diesel cells around Vanimo is all gone. Those things, people will be looking at continuing that. Maybe this is an opportunity for government to look into this and put in measures which will help these little SMEs. And talking about SMEs, the government of Papua New Guinea needs to review the situation in regards to the SMEs for West Sepik, especially for Vanimo district. Many of the small businesses closed down. Many of them couldn't run the taxis, buses and trucks and stores. Stores closed down because they got no staff.
With the economical, agricultural and traditional ties spanning generations for many families like Dorothy Tekwi's across the border into Papua province, the outspoken women leader says that life is getting tougher for communities in the villages.
The government may need this opportunity to be able to put in place some measures. For example, controlling the kina. Kina is going out in millions across the border every week. they need to put some measures in. They need to have a little bit of control. A lot of our citizens are going over there with drugs. They are being caught just across the border. And it's surprising that there's some 80 people, 60 to 80 people over there, 80 young men over there. And these situations are still there. While the Indonesian side, they have all the facilities ready and all that, our side, we are not ready. The center at Batas is not been open for quite a few years now. I especially hope that they will have some measures to cater for the West Coast community, because we have relatives across there. And some of our relatives have died. We didn't go across. We need some measures for allowances for the West Coast community.
Nearby on a dreary afternoon, we make it over to stop by the home of Peter Onikre, a number 2 local ward member who shared his story with us, not just as a community leader, but a villager, a farmer, a husband and a father, comparing life pre-COVID-19 to now.
Before COVID, no plenty too much lo work lo ground, but informal sector, buy animal something long. Batas, Kosalim, more or less plenty money involved. But after time COVID come on, plenty money must go back. You know, God will all survive. So all plan install a place you right long all, because only depend on ground. So trango line install a settlement and life is hardly leak long all. You know, all money ka desla instinct, survival instinct. So only enough lo survive. Side long economy, lo cash, putting money concert lo pocket lo lik man meri. Matru. Timba ikat, but then not much. Not much royalty. Wanem lik money cut, online cut, only you seem long just lo panimol, basically protein. Lo mipla loya, lo side informal sector, big lo bagrap. Cash flow down, because loya mipla you know kat plenty cash economy awesome cash activity take place long, especially lo vanimo. Mipla depend money mipla sa depend lo 2 bla road. 1 bla and long workman pay blow workman. Public servant or private companies or workman pay kam also sharing one time or not line blow.
The soft-spoken LLG president says that rural communities, industrious through the SME sector were left unprepared when COVID-19 hit. But he sees both good and bad sides to the situation.
Good problem me talking me plus you mean non upload depend too much long this la informal sector. Plenty blame me all people you must think lo go back lo ground. Go back lo ground no holim ground. Walk him garden, plan him cocoa, walk him all something because lo long term and by now lo sustainable. But so you may depend long informal sector. Time heavy come up, you don't have lo sustainable yet. Lo me looking mo long help mo liglik man meri. The only way lo people help more, we can talk about development, but the way to help them is people must put the money concert lo pocket blow. So how we put money to them is those who said the ground, only must work lo ground. So people must facilitate him like solvara stuff. So people facilitate him market blow lo selling fish. Maybe planning liglik vanilla, planning liglik cocoa. Gardening the style of symbol land blimis are working also working planning mix all by mixing planning garden kake.
While many from town moved back home to their villages along the west coast, it was the informal economy, the SME sector, that was hit the hardest. Welcome back. Robbie Kabe has spent the last 24 years with PNG Customs at the border post at Wutung. His wealth of experience labels COVID-19 as his biggest challenge yet.
It was a new thing to us at that time, as most of us, the officers and the security. We were the only persons on the ground were the CIQ officers and the security people, and it was all about a new thing that we didn't expect, knew anything that would come about. But when that happened, everybody just kept to ourselves, and then we had all the agencies trying to find ways to address the issue in terms of being part of the community. The only way we could do was that we bring the community together and we would have the community support.
He has seen firsthand the changes that have occurred over the years at the Wutung border post.
There was no infrastructure at this place as it was just a forest itself. There was no border markers. There were only border monument for the Indonesian side, which is the lighthouse, they call it, or the monument itself. That was the only infrastructure from the Indonesian side. As for PNG, there was nothing at all except the government station at Wutung. We have movement every day for movement. Previously, there was no movement of people as the border was so strict by the Indonesian authorities. Slowly, it expands up. It was a declared port, and then we had facilities built on the ground, and I had the officers like myself was on the ground at that time, and then we facilitated movement of people through the actual arrangements by the two governments.
Robbie says previously his role saw him dealing with a steady stream of visitors to the border and vice versa. These daily activities ceased almost overnight.
The services come from Mosby or anywhere else, but for here they think that that's cheaper, that's faster. I can just walk across and come over, and I have families there so they can bring it over, and maybe Kina value is maybe higher than Rupiah. That's how it's going. That's how people in PNG, how we see. People really don't understand of our national security, our national interest of our Kina and everything else. It becomes just a regular trade center for PNG to go over and shop, including imports, travel into Asia and our part of the world, which is much cheaper. The well-advanced country, they have everything for us to learn. We're just trying to tap into something that is just right to our next door.
Meanwhile, the head of the immigration facility on the Indonesian side of the border says they have also considered the traditional and economic ties and await bilateral talks between the two countries to allow life to reclaim some normalcy under new arrangements.
Untuk Indonesia, kami sampai saat ini per 1 Februari terhitung, kami nyatakan pos lintas batas negara yang ditutup secara resmi. Pos lintas batas ini akan dibuka kembali. Kami masih menunggu ada pertemuan bilateral antar negara, yaitu Papua Nugini Indonesia. Tetapi kami juga Indonesia menunggu Papua Nugini. Kalau Papua Nugini telah bersedia atau menyatakan pos lintas batas ini dibuka, berarti kami juga akan membuka supaya hubungan antara Papua Nugini kembali berjalan seperti biasa. Hubungan ekonomi tradisional, ekspor-impor, lintas batas manusia dan barang berjalan kembali seperti biasa.
Looking ahead for West Sepik, it will be a special case to consider, and the provincial authorities believe it will take serious consultation.
We have a whole lot of tasks in our hands now, because the quarantine will have to say something on it. The customs and immigrations will have to say something on that. The whole process of the border depends on the CIQ. And we have to fumigate, and we have to disintegrate, and we have to go back to basic again to have the border prepared for that. We need to have a bilateral understanding, not traveling and passengers commencing all at the same time. What is pressing right now is the trade.
Because at the border right now, we would not want it to be open all of a sudden to what it used to be like. People are not compliant to the Nukla Passing that health have been promoting. They are not practicing it in town, in the local shops, in the buses. I do not expect them to be doing it at the border, so we cannot open the border just like that. So what our advice will be is that if we have to open, it will be in phases, and it will be in a controlled manner that is safe. As much as possible, we really do not want to compromise our situation here. We'd rather wait until there's a vaccine available because of the health capacity. That's the underlying thing for us. If we suddenly open up and there's a mass movement of people and we get sudden escalation in the number of cases, we just need 3 cases of severe or critical cases of COVID-19, and we would not be able to manage it.
In our next episode of Papua New Guinea's response to COVID-19, The Road to Recovery, we look at the impacts of communities in the Western Highlands and Jiwaka provinces. I'm Hannah Joku. Join me then.